Welcome everybody to today's lecture on classic negative strategies. So these are the negative strategies that you need to know how to use in order to be a really successful policy debater in Eastern Missouri. So first, we have to understand exactly what a negative strategy is. And I like to call a negative strategy a plan to contest the 1AC. So many people think of this as, just what you read in the 1NC, and that's certainly true. But often a better way to think about it is what are the possible 2NRs, right? So a negative strategy is a collection of possible 2NRs. And when you understand your negative strategy, you can answer the question, why did you choose blank off case against blank affirmative? So hopefully that helps a little bit. And I think it's going to get elucidated as we talk about the specific strategies. The first one is also the simplest, case plus disads. So this is when you're reading solvency attacks, you're reading attacks on each advantage, and you're reading 1 to 3 disadvantages generally. And the goal is to mitigate affirmative impacts with case arguments and then outweigh with a disadvantage. So no matter what's happening in round, okay, I want to mitigate their impacts using my case arguments. Maybe I take out solvency with like a circumvention turn and they don't solve any of their impacts. Maybe I just have, little different things on each advantage and I've put a lot of doubt onto the advantages, even if I didn't completely beat it. And then I've got at least one disad remaining that I can use to take out the whole case, to outweigh it. I have a bigger impact. The 2NRs, you're generally going to have a very limited number of 2NRs. If you're reading 2 disads, there are probably 2 potential 2NRs. There's one where you go for disad A, and there's one where you go for disad B. We recommend that you only go for one disad with this kind of a strategy to really make it clear what's going on. Tell the story of that disad in the 2NR, and you're going to have a better time than if you're simply going for everything in that 5-minute speech, which is going to be a lot harder. So case and one of your disads with this strategy. Second, we have the counterplan net benefit strategy. So the goal of a counterplan and a net benefit is to mitigate affirmative impacts with the counterplan while outweighing with a disadvantage. So there are some examples of this. You could read an actor counterplan with a politics disad. So an actor counterplan might say, rather than Congress passing the plan, the Supreme Court should rule the plan. And then a politics disad, which draws issue with passing something through Congress. So you mitigate the impacts with a counterplan because the court's doing it solves the same advantages. And then you make your counterplan competitive and outweigh with your disadvantage, in this case, a politics disad. Another version of this might be an advantage counterplan and a topic disad. An advantage disad is a disad that says another way to solve an impact. And then a topic disad would be something like, we're no longer selling arms. That's going to cause a loss in our manufacturing sector. And then a final example of that would be the plan inclusive counterplan, or PIC, plus a DA specific to that. So that's, we do all of your plan minus, a little bit. And then we have a disad to that little bit. And then we say that, doing almost all of your plans solves all of your impacts. It mitigates affirmative impacts. And then you outweigh with the disadvantage that doesn't link. The 2NR in this is almost always going to be the counterplan and the net benefit. Seems simple enough. And you can totally mix and match these, right? You could have 2 disads and a counterplan, and then your potential 2NRs would be, okay, counterplan and net benefit, or disad and case. But in general, you want to make sure that you have at least a strategy like this going into each round. Next, topicality. This is the universal addition. The goal is to provide an alternative win condition for the negative. So the good thing about topicality is that it's sort of separated away from the rest of the debate. So let's say you're going T, CP, disad, and you are losing on the counterplan. And because you're losing on the counterplan, you're going to struggle to outweigh with the disad, right? The good thing about T is no matter how badly you've messed up the rest of the round, you can win on T alone. Generally, your 2NR with T should be only topicality. That's not always true in front of lay judges, but for a flow judge, 5 minutes of T in the 2NR can just win you around. It's always good to have T as sort of an out, even if you normally don't go for it, in case they pull out some amazing blocks against your counterplans and your disads that you're not ready for. Finally, the one-off critique. Now, this isn't popular in our district yet, but it's generally, I think, a pretty good strategy if you have a flow judge. The goal is to win the critique. It's your only off-case position. And there are two main ways to do it. There's a pre-fiat win, which, if you haven't seen the K lecture, in most basic terms means something along the lines of because of an action in the debate space that was bad, we win. And for that, you need to make sure you're winning framework, the perm, the link, and the impact. Or you can win post fiat, which generally says something in the world of debate, right? Like the fake world that we're pretending to pass policies in. And there you want to win the perm, the link, the impact, and the alternative. Now, this is not a great description of Ks. Go watch the K lecture if you want to understand more about what that means. But a viable negative strategy, if you've got a flow judge, is always just to go with that one-off critique strategy. You still need case, but the main part of your time is going to be spent with the critique. Let's go through some examples with these classic negative strategies using a topic and a case that Grace and I ran for a long time: end arms sales to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So the affirmative, the basic thesis was that we'll end arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Without the weapons, they're going to be forced to end the war in Yemen, right? This is a really basic version of it, but this is what a lot of teams look like. First, if we're reading case versus disad, you'd on case read a couple of arguments, right? Ending arms sales won't affect their policy. Other countries will provide weapons. And then maybe you'd read some disads, right? The oil disad, Saudi Arabia is going to hike oil prices, mess up the world economy. The Iran disad, ending arms sales emboldens Iran and they start a war. So the goal here is we use these case arguments to take out their impacts. And then we can go for either the oil disad or the Iran disad, whichever one the app fumbles the most, and we can outweigh the case. Seems simple enough? It is. This is the, if you can do this well, you will be a good policy debater. Counterplan plus net benefit is pretty similar. You need a little bit more expertise on exactly how counterplans work, but it can be incredibly powerful, almost abusively powerful. So let's say you had an executive counterplan and a politics disad. That would be saying, rather than Congress ending arms sales to Saudi Arabia, the president is going to sign an order suspending them, right? They're the commander in chief. They can do that. And then you can read a disad, a politics disad. You can go check out my politics lecture if that's something you're interested in, and specifically link it to Congress. So because yours is no longer going through Congress, you can win that way. An advantage counterplan and a disad would be international aid and oil, right? Instead of stopping arms sales, let's give aid to Yemen, solves their impact, prevents the oil disad. Or you could use a pick, right? End offensive arms only, still give them defensive arms. It solves the Yemen thing because they need offensive weapons to fight in Yemen, but it doesn't link to the Iran disad because it doesn't embolden Iran because we don't leave Saudi Arabia defenseless. Next, topicality. You can just add a violation like topicality. You can only get rid of FMS and DCS. I'm not going to go in and bother to explain those. You'll understand T with your main arguments. One interesting thing with T, though, especially as it relates to counterplans, is you can get people in a double bind, right? If you read a topicality argument, like you need to act through Congress, right? Or you need to act through the courts. And then you read a counterplan, which is acting through something else, then they have to either admit, okay, we're not topical, we lose on T, or the counterplan does compete because we're not using that actor. So that's just one example, and you should look for those and their availability on the topic to make a really beautiful TCPDA strategy, alphabet soup as I like to call it. Finally, the one-off K, we've got the FEM international relations critique. We loved reading this our sophomore year. The critique looks at the way that the AF plays into traditional patriarchal notions of international relations, proposes a better feminist alternative. Again, we're going to have more specific lectures about critiques, but this is one really good example. You'd run this alone, you'd go for it in the 2NR. That's the whole strategy. I hope that this has been helpful in sort of talking through the most basic negative strategies that you want to look for on each topic, and that can be incredibly effective for winning you rounds from your first tournament to nationals. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you very much for watching.